Welcome to the Vilest Rag, a podcast created by the Ubyssey, Ubyssey's student newspaper. I'm Elena Massing, I'm the Ubyssey's features editor, and I'm your host for today. Except, like last week, we have another very special guest. Woo! Joining me for the intro today is Ayla Chaudhry, our editor-in-chief, who you may remember from our very, very first episode of this podcast.
The best episode.
It does have the most views. Not that views are a metric of how good something is.
I think just because it was new.
The people love you.
True. I don't know about that, but I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well also. What have you been up to? What's new since the last time we spoke?
True. Well,
the last time we spoke on the air. I see you every day.
Okay. But. Well, it was reading break. And the editorial went to Pender Island. Pender is the trip we take with all of our reporters. Well, not all of them, but whoever wants to come. And we have this house we rent out on Pender Island. We josh around. We do work. We get to know each other. It's very fun and chill. Yeah, how did you like Pender?
I had a lot of fun this year. This was my third Pender, I guess.
Also my third.
Yes. I went to one in my first year when I wasn't an editor yet, and then I skipped one because Why do you look shocked?
Actually, this is my fourth Pender. Now I feel very old.
Whoa.
Sorry, continue, because you skipped one. I didn't skip that one.
Yeah, I skipped that one because I was singing in Verdi's Requiem for choir. And then I went to the one last year, and then this year. And I think this was my favorite. I think
really good.
It was a really good group of people, and I had a lot of fun. I liked watching Rocky Horror.
True. Huge. We got to show people the culture.
Yes. I've had Rocky Horror on the mind recently. What was your favorite part?
Quyen, our great opinion columnist, did a lot of cooking at Pender. Mm-hmm. Huge. She made the infamous vegetarian lasagna that I made at the editorial retreat, because I think she asked for the recipe or something. I forget, but I sent it to her, and then she made it. She made it so much better than mine. It was fire. She also made tofu tacos and pancakes. She's a great cook. Mm-hmm. So this was huge.
Yes. After this episode of the Vilest Rag aired, and by after this, I mean the first one, Quyen made the vegetarian lasagna for myself and Spencer.
Huge.
Test run moment,
huge.
I guess. Mm-hmm. And it was delicious. I think it just keeps getting better. A new Quyen classic. But tofu tacos. I have to say, I'm not a tofu taco truther. I love tofu. I love tofu and other things. I love stir fry. But I think that scares me a little bit. I had left by this point, so I never tried the tofu tacos.
Boo.
But what was your stance on it?
They were actually very good, because I don't know how she prepared them, but I think they were like shredded up or like chopped really finely, the tofu, because I don't like the texture of tofu, but I couldn't even tell they were spicy. Everyone could add their own toppings. Huge. I eat so much vegetarian food on these trips. I'm not vegetarian, but I feel like it seems like all I eat is tofu, but huge for my vegetable intake and my low iron.
So what's been up with you post-Pender? What have you been doing since you got back?
Absolutely nothing fun. I had an essay. My thesis is chugging along. There is the Board of Governors, staff, and faculty elections that we're working on. So much editing, so much writing. Absolutely nothing fun, but that is okay. It is midterm, almost finals time, so it's expected. What have you been doing since the retreat?
I was supposed to do something fun. Saumya knows this well, and you will too when you get to the end of my conversation with Spencer, which is later in this episode. But basically, after we recorded the episode, we were supposed to go see Nuremberg, movie.
What a fun and lighthearted sounded movie.
Of course. But we were supposed to go see that after the podcast at 6:00. We finished recording the podcast, I think, at like almost 6:30. Yeah, and we figure, okay, there's there are probably ads that have played. It probably started around 6:15. Like, by the time we get there, we will have missed maybe like half an hour of the movie. That's fine. That's fine. It's 2.5 hours long. We'll pick it up as we go. And history. It happened already. So there's that. But we are leaving in a rush. We're leaving in a rush to get there. And Spencer always takes a really, really long time to pack up his bag, as you know. He has so many bags, like two different bags that he has at any given time. And so we get to the theater. And it's at 5th Avenue. I don't know if you're familiar. No. But because of their liquor license, they are 19 plus. Oh. Even if you're not planning on drinking, like getting into the theater, you need 2 pieces of ID. And as we're walking into the theater, Spencer says, I forgot my wallet on my desk. And then, so, we try to get in, we can't, obviously, because he doesn't have ID. And you know how it is.
He looks like a 5-year-old.
So he looks like a 5-year-old. So there's that. We come back to the office just to get the wallet, you know. We have a whole night to kill because we're movieless. Mm-hmm. He walks over to his desk. What does he see on his desk? Not his wallet, nothing. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out his wallet. His pants pocket at that. Like, it's right there. It's right there. The wallet was right there. And he was like, oh, I only checked my jacket pocket. The one on, like, the inside here, where his wallet usually is, and didn't check any other pocket.
I just don't understand why he didn't check his other pockets.
I don't either.
Next time you guys need to give him an airport pat down.
Yeah. I'm joking. Yeah. So we didn't see Nuremberg. But I think Saumya got a refund, so it's okay.
Huge.
I think we'll go a different day. It'll happen at some point.
I think I would have had to, like, turn around and not talk to Spencer for a week. Not actually, but I think I would have been much more annoyed.
I think for a brief second, there was hostility, but then there was a recognition of the humor of the situation. So it's all good. We're chill. We're good. Yeah. Happens to no one but Spencer. But before we get into my conversation with him, maybe we should take a look at what we published this week.
True.
If you want to start us off.
Yes, I can start off with news. We have an AMS Council recap written by me, photos taken by Zoe Wagner. Council was hearing updates on Campus Vision 2050, which, if you don't know, is like the big long-term report about like plans for the development and growth of campus, hence the 2050. So none of us will be here, but you know, it's been going on for several years. As well as talking about the federal budget, specifically the fact that a lot of international student visas are being cut and international students are relied on quite heavily for Ubyssey's budget, which is unfortunate, but the truth of the matter. So things are looking a little dire. So they were talking about that as well. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And in opinion, there is no fairness if we cannot cheat, an op-ed by Professor Farid Larousi with an illustration by Ayla Cilliers. So this op-ed discusses AI's role in how cheating has morphed from being perceived as an opportunity to something more industry-like, with little room to figure out the very meaning of being a student. And in arts and culture, there's Dracula, a comedy of terrors, is biting comedy with a touch of camp by Zoe Stoyanovich. And you have an affinity for monster media.
I do. I mean,
what's up with your thesis?
My thesis is it's about Frankenstein, and in the dream house, she's in the second round of like my draft, I guess. I didn't see the new Frankenstein movie, but I'm going to. I actually like can't shut up about monsters. Like it's like this is a very and there was Halloween, so I just surrounded by it.
Mm-hmm. I don't know how you'll feel about the new Frankenstein movie. I did see it, and not that I've read the book, but I think I vaguely know what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I've told you about it so much.
Well, yes. They've changed some things that I kind of wasn't expecting them to change, but I thought Jacob Elordi was quite good in it. And I'm
Okay.
usually not a Jacob Elordi truther.
I thought he would kind of
So-
suck, not gonna lie.
No,
but
and Oscar Isaac, beautiful, perfect,
of
great.
course he was gonna be great.
Mia Goth, also great.
This is true. Yeah, I think. Nope, I don't know. I forgot what I was gonna say, so we'll
That's
keep
okay.
going.
But go see Frankenstein.
True.
Or don't go see it. We saw it in theaters because it was at the VIF Center. But I think you can only really see it on Netflix now.
It's not.
I might be
yeah,
lying.
it's
I don't
not
know
on
about that.
Netflix.
Anyways, sports.
Sports. Big win. UBC women's soccer wins their second straight Canada West title. Beating they beat Trinity Western University Spartans 2-0. The game recap is by Maya Cesario with photos by Sydney Shaw.
Great.
Huge.
And in humor, slow walkers' detriment to UBC pedestrian traffic flow exhibit zero sense of urgency by Selena Saleh with illustrations by Effie Huang, a subject that is deeply, deeply personal to me.
This is you just walk really fast. Like
You just walk really slow.
no, I don't.
This is about you. You're the problem.
I am like several like. I think you just like run every. Maybe it's because you're like so short, so you try to make up for it by running.
Well, yeah. But, like, no.
Sorry.
Whatever. It's
Sorry.
fine. You can read all of these pieces and more at our website, ubyssey.ca, which is updated daily. And in this episode of the Vilest Rag, I have another conversation with a member of our editorial board. And this week I spoke to Spencer Izen, our deputy managing and opinion editor. And you can stay tuned after that to learn about the OTEU strikes explained by columnist Quyen Schroeder. So that's all from myself and Aisha for now. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll be back again after a short break. Spencer Izen is the Ubyssey's opinion editor and deputy managing editor, and he's joining me today to talk about how opinion works a bit differently from other sections and to explain what exactly his role is within the Ubyssey's management team. So, hi Spencer.
Hi, Elena.
How are you today?
I'm good. Bit of a hectic day, but otherwise good.
Why was it a hectic day?
Just running around. Lots of shit to do. Oh shit, I can't swear in a podcast.
I mean, you can. It's okay.
Okay. Well, I'll try not to.
Well, anyways, first question. Let's get right into it. Are you happy with your new haircut?
Wow, really down to exactly what I was doing today. Well, I can't see her, but in principle, yes.
What?
I
What
can't
does that mean?
No, I can't see it right now, but in principle, yes.
Did you not see it when
It gets
it was
messed up
happening?
whenever I walk from North Barcade to here.
Do you put gel
Yes,
in it or
yes,
something?
but it's not formidable enough to withstand the wind. So, all things held constant from before. Yes, in case something got messed up on my way here. No, but
Is it windy outside?
yes,
Really?
yes.
Well, there you go. I'll have it be known that we were supposed to record this yesterday, but Spencer insisted that we couldn't do it until he got a haircut. So we'll let the people comment on whether it was worth it or not. I think your hair looks mostly the same, but
Thanks.
just parted a little differently.
Yeah, and shorter.
Not really. It's just kind of more to the side. I think if it was brought to the front like it usually
Oh.
is, it would still be covering your face.
Give it a day. Give it a day.
What?
It'll
What's
do that.
gonna happen
in a day? It will do that.
Okay. Anyways, so before we get into your work at the Ubyssey, tell us a bit about who you are outside of that. What are
Not much else. I am a fourth year political science and information sciences students. I love both of my fields of study. I have another job where I work for the Freedom of Information and Privacy Association as a researcher. I study the operation of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act and the Information Management Act, the provincial record-keeping statute in British Columbia, and how it works in 55 public bodies approximately in British Columbia. So I spend not a half of my time, maybe a third or a quarter of my time outside the Ubyssey conducting that research.
Don't tell your other boss.
Yes, don't tell me that. Well, I'm paid for that amount, so it's theoretically acceptable. But I spend some other time doing that, and I spend the vast majority of my time outside of class in here from 8 to 8 each day. And I guess that's predominantly what we're going to talk about. But yeah.
Yeah. So you have two titles here, opinion editor and deputy managing editor, the latter of which is a brand new position this year. So talk me through some of the things you usually find yourself doing for each of those. What does the average day look like for you?
The day kind of responds to whatever stories I need to work on, because those are the most time contingent aspect of what I do. So as deputy managing editor, occasionally I have to take on reporting responsibilities. So a lot of my morning consists of working on either editing stuff for opinion or reporting stuff for usually for the news section, but in my capacity as deputy managing editor. Once classes start, at 9:30 to 12:30, or if I'm lucky later in the day, I'll come back to the office, and then that's usually when most of my work as deputy managing editor gets to take place. So I work on a lot of different, like what we could broadly call special projects. I'm working with our illustrations and prints editor right now to review the print product. As you know, I worked a little bit with our web developers on a few projects. What else do I do? I worked with the news editor and Stephen and our editor-in-chief Ayla on rethinking how we cover governance proceedings, and how we can shift from what I'd like to do, hopefully a shift away from covering immediate proceedings to giving people a better look at what issues are arising from those meetings. So not treating governance meetings like the AMS, the Board of Governors, and the Senate as points of arrival, but points of departure for stories that make our way into our report. So I don't want to dismiss what I do as either half administrative or half high-level abstract stuff that transcends an individual section. I am still a section editor too, so I am in the unique position of having half of my work at the Ubyssey be affected by my other half as deputy managing editor, which I think is a good experience, because I think it keeps my planning grounded quite a bit in the experience of a section editor. I have to wear both hats, and I think it's extremely useful actually for going about literally my day and planning planning what I'm going to prioritize as deputy managing editor, because there are, as Saumya and Ayla will know, many tasks going on in the background. Particularly this year, we have a large strategic reports implements over this year and the next year. But my day-to-day consists of finding time to work on very discrete projects like finishing news stories or editing files for opinion, or working on things that take a long time and stretch into multiple days, weeks, or even months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've touched a little bit on the strategic report before in a past episode, but you took on a lot of the writing and sort of guiding how exactly we were putting that together. So do you want to talk about that?
Sure. There is a report that I really like from the, Office of the... It's a New Brunswick. It's the Office of the Child Welfare Advocates. I can't remember the exact office title, but it's from 2023, and it's called How It All Broke. And I typically don't like policy report style writing. I think it's really like formulaic and kind of bland sometimes, and it has the energy of something that's AI generated.
That's huge coming from you.
Yeah,
the most formulaic and bland guy to ever walk the earth.
Thanks. But I really liked. Thank you. But I really liked this particular report. Again, it's how it all broke. It's a narrative breakdown of all of the interrelated problems that are facing New Brunswick's social policy field. And then the other thing that was going through my mind as a now managing editor is thinking about my training as a student of science and technology studies, where and particularly, as everyone in the office knows, I'm a big fan of the famous French theorist Bruno Latour, who's one of the proponents of actor network theory. And broadly, A&T is really hard to explain, but it's about, in part, challenging the division between the natural and the social world, and particularly trying to acknowledge that non-human things matter when we're studying social things. So this conversation is in part mediated by the equipment, how close this particular microphone is, what else in here, the lighting, etc. All of these things matter, and that's kind of what A&T's proposition is. So when I was deciding with the other management editors to put together a strategic report, I was really trying to think of all of the ways that all of the individual kind of discrete microscopic challenges and problems that I was thinking or seeing as a section editor over the course of everyday editing were all related to each other. Like in the report, we chronicled that there's 4 problems that the publication was facing. One of them was the knowledge problem, where we just were, I think we described it as frequently receiving drafts that made editors crash out in the office because they were frankly not good. And that was eventually, as you explore the issue a little bit more, you begin to realize that is actually inherently connected to our participation model, which is we had this model before with pitch lists, as you know, where we would just pitch stuff out and then to a list that was eligible to anyone who was currently a student at Ubyssey. You didn't have to be trained. You could just pick up a story whenever an editor pitched one out, and that obviously was not the consistent with the idea of journalism as a responsible and powerful institution that actually matters for a democracy. I was never always uncomfortable with the proposition that journalism is both powerful, but that power does not need to be checked with any sort of like responsibility to train ourselves and continuously improve. And I wasn't really comfortable with what was frankly an unprofessional approach to guaranteeing a reliable publication. So that was all going through my minds. Again, a lot of thinking about like the political and the implications for how we were organizing the Ubyssey. A lot of the administrative a lot of the operational implications of how we administratively organized ourselves. So that's like how things like Saumya and I. One of the first things we did when we became managing editor, or I became deputy managing editor and Saumya became managing editor, was to organize our shared drive. We'd never had that before. We had everyone had their own feudalized Google account.
Oh,
and
God.
Yes, oh God, indeed. And it really bothered me coming from the experience of my other job, studying record-keeping practices, and being, I presented at archival conferences on the implications of certain user designs for different paradigms in archival thoughts. It's a really different world altogether. But it became really useful here because I was able to see the way that we organize ourselves and the way we hold content meetings, the way we structure interaction in the office for really boring things, actually matters at the end of the line for readers ultimately. So the separation between the administrative and the operational aspect of it is quite blurred in that report, even though it's kind of presented as a product of or a commitment to readers about the journalism. A lot of it is not about the journalism. A lot of it is like how we're going to get people involved in the office in the first place. But in the same spirit, I think, of dismissing those dualisms that Bruno Latour got rid of or tried to get rid of in many books in the 90s and 2000s, that's kind of what I was trying to do. And then applying that to some of my thinking about public administration and things like that. It sounds very business-like. I'm not a business student, so I don't really know much about that, but it's most of it was just kind of piecing together various things I had read in social, political, and informatics theory into just one attempt at a school of thought around how this place can be organized, and that ultimately culminated in the Reloaded report. And the way I decided to tell it was, I think, kind of reflective of what we do, which is a bit of a story about ourselves. And then upon the conclusion of that story, we get to chart the next part of the story, which is this year and the year after and the years after that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess a large part of those changes has been changing the way that editors are trained, or maybe creating a way that editors are trained, because maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but I figured out how to do the job from simply doing the job, not because anyone actually told me how to. And that is definitely not the case for this year. At least we're hoping it's not the case for this year. So do you want to tell me about what you've been doing in that area?
Sure. Oh my God. I mean, I think the project that you're referring to is the continuing editorial professional development pilot project. Much like S.H.I.E.L.D., we are working on the name. Marvel reference, yes. But that came together from a few different backgrounds. I mean, first, I've been thinking about the concept of what it means to be a journalist and a professional for a little while. I don't want to be a journalist professionally. I want to be a public servant in the federal government, ideally as a lawyer for the government one day. And in my research, I study the ethics of public service a little bit too. Studying freedom of information inherently takes you to think about like constitutional conventions, particularly when you're talking about the ethics of disclosing a record, and what implications that has in relation to ministerial responsibility, and the relationship between civil servants and their ministers and in turn the public. So what I was trying to do with CEPD is think of a way to first inculcate in everyone one shared sense of what we owe readers. And that was the first unit. But everything after that, I tried to organize, again, heavily borrowing on my training in science, technology studies, political theory. A lot of the way that the syllabus that we call it of readings, where, as you'll know, editors get 2 or 3 readings a week. You have to submit one of those wonderful filings. I read those filings.
2 or 3 is crazy.
2 or 3, yeah.
2, 3, 6.
6 for the law unit, but that was worth it. I maintain that it was a worthy exercise to read case law. I did it when I was in high school, when I needed to defend my then student newspaper against my school board's adventurous interpretations of the School Act.
We'll come back to that.
We'll come back to that. Good. I love to talk about that. What was I talking about? Anyway, the law unit was a lot, but and I'll talk about those readings for about 30 minutes, and then we'll do an activity afterwards. And a lot of the way that came together was particularly in the second semester of the last course. I had a fantastic experience in a course called Poly 240, Currents of Political Thought, taught by Professor Anna Yurkiewicz. And I did not think I would like that class at first, to be radically honest. I thought I was very committed to a very particular area of political science, and it opened me up to philosophy and political theory in a way that I didn't anticipate I would encounter before. And what I really liked about that class is every successive class, you could see the story that the syllabus is telling cumulatively over the course of the semester. And there's a few other classes I had like that, specifically Info 302, taught by Professor Richard Hernandez, about socio-technical systems theory. Global History of Capitalism, taught History 108, taught when I was in my first year by Professor Jessica Hanser, who I think is at the University of Copenhagen now. What other classes have been influential? Spencer McKay's Poly 302, or not 302, 348. Anyway, lots of different classes. I started to notice that there was all the classes I really liked. You could see the story unfolding over time. And I really tried my best to organize our syllabus this year in a way that you could see the story of what I was trying to tell about who a journalist is and what competences we owe to readers is ultimately. So the first part of the program focuses on building a shared disposition, talking about ethics and information literacy. Then then in the unit we're in now, which is part 2, is largely about the skills of being an editor. And then the third unit, which we'll get to in the second semester, will be about confronting specific challenges associated with being a journalist. So that will include things like relationships with sources, demonstration coverage, data visualization, things like that. But it intentionally, some people have labeled it academic. I embrace that. I don't really think there's a division between theory and practice. I think that's a very dangerous division to make, especially in our line of work. So the program is very much an attempt at making an intense as possible introduction to journalism centered around professional responsibility.
Yeah. I'd like to pivot to your work as a section editor.
Sure.
Because what the hell?
I'm the op editor.
Yeah,
I
sometimes.
occupy people on behalf of the Ubyssey.
Well,
okay.
Opinion operates pretty differently than a lot of our other written sections do. So tell me about that. Why is it the way that it is?
Why is it the way that it is? I wonder that too. So there's
also, what is it?
What is it? The domain of journalism, or the subfield of journalism that we practice is opinion journalism. So the journalists that I work with wear their bias on the outside. So half of our a little bit more than half. Now the majority of our section's content comes from columnists who are senior journalists in our organization who are trusted to provide a reliable voice on the topic. to readers. So we have 2 columns right now. Maya Tamasi writes about largely political ideology in the contemporary world, and Quyen Schroeder writes about the Alma Mater Society.
Quyen Schroeder of later in this
podcast fame. Yes, she works on that too. Writes about the AMS and AMS Council. And my job is to support them. So I don't tell them at all what to write. I do not tell them. I tell them broadly what a pitch could look like. We talk about how to make arguments newsworthy. How in Quyen's case, it's a bit easier in that respect because she goes to council meetings, and there's a steady stream of things that council's doing. So she has a more constrained amount of things to talk about. Versus Maya's got the wonderful challenge of talking about a lot of different things potentially at once, and the challenge is to bring the world to Ubyssey in a way that is sensible. It sounds very basic and cliche, but it actually becomes really difficult if you trap yourself in the language of cliches to talk about writing in a really vague way. So a lot of what I have found opinion editor is trying to articulate what is good and not good writing, and do that in a way that supports a pluralistic view of that, which is really hard. If you look up guides on how to write op-eds, you will get a 1 or 2 page, very heuristic-driven document. It's not really... heuristic isn't a pejorative, but I'm using it as that in part because if I keep telling you that you need a good hook, that's the word, phrase everyone uses to describe what a good op-ed is. You need a hook. That's not really helpful. If you're not confident in your writing ability, you're not going to know what that is. So it's my job as someone who doesn't necessarily identify themselves as a brilliant writer themselves to help people find a writing style that works for them if they're an op-ed contributor. So someone who's not part of our staff publication, who's just contributing an opinion essay to our publication based on something that they see in the news or they want to talk about that's relevant to our community. I work with those folks. I kind of have to catch them up to speed to what opinion journalism is, what it's like. I have the added challenge because of the information environment in which we operate of re-educating people about what op-eds are. They're the closest thing in terms of the genre that's kind of taken over this form of original user-generated content, I would think, is those Instagram slides that make arguments about all sorts of things. That's kind of similar to what we do, with the notable and massive distinction that we fact-check everything. It's extended. It's non-polarizing in design. And our publication and our editing is not subordinate to algorithmic interests of large multinational corporations. It's subordinate to the ethics of what we do. But that is largely what opinion journalism is about. We started, when I became opinion editor 2 years ago, this is my 3rd year doing it, we didn't have columnists at all. I'm happy that we have 2 right now, and we're about to hire a few more. We just closed applications for that. So I'm excited about where opinion is going. I part of me wishes I had an additional year to do this. Theoretically, I could apply again, but I'm unlikely to do that. But my inspiration in part very recently has been the New York Times' Kathleen Kingsbury. As everyone in the office knows, I love the profile that was run in New York Magazine about her. I kind of want that experience when I'm done with the publication of being asked, what is it you're proud of about what you've done with opinion? And she famously gestures, just look around. Kind of a crazy line, but that's kind of what I'm going for by the end of my term.
Yeah, I had no idea. I couldn't tell from how you reference it,
every day,
several times
so well
a day.
Written. It's just so well written, and she says some wild things.
I guess you've already kind of touched on what makes an op-ed, but what makes a good op-ed, especially if you don't necessarily agree with someone's opinion? How do you look at someone at a piece of writing and decide if there's something worth honing in on?
Oh my god, I'm gonna try and be concise, which is usually my enemy as this concept. Okay.
We know.
2 things. One, again, coming from a place of someone who does not necessarily identify themselves as a brilliant writer naturally, the first thing that I think makes a good op-ed is, I'm going to borrow a term from record keeping called reasonable particularity, which is, in other words, just being as specific as you can. I don't put too much stock in clarity and brevity before I think particularity first. A lot of the time when I get op-ed pitches, they are along the lines of, I want to write about X, Y, or Z. It'll be a top. I want to write about this is a real one. Last year, after the American election, the presidential election in November, got like 4 or 5 pitches about I want to write about why the Democrats lost. And why that does not make a good pitch is it does not explain on the reader's end why that is appearing in the Ubyssey. There's no place-based identity to that essay. There might be, but based on the pitch, if you just say that, that's not good enough for me. The way you could make that into a good op-ed for the Ubyssey, because there's no such thing as a good op-ed independent of the publication you're sending it to. It has to be work for the specific place it's appearing in. Otherwise, there's no that kind of erodes the purpose of having a publication at that point. It becomes like Instagram, where you can just all forms of media converge onto one site, and this kind of just grows genreless, amorphous space, which I don't like. So what makes a good op-ed for us specifically is it explains the conditions of production as it relates to Ubyssey. In other words, like if you pitched a similar story and said, here's why the Democrats lost, and you started with, I've been in political science 320, which is the United States government. My class has been following the election the entire semester. Then you can suddenly see, what this actually makes a lot of sense, and it will intuitively explain to the reader, or signal to the reader that op-ed could not have appeared anywhere else but the Ubyssey. That op-ed would be really weird if it was in the New York Times. It wouldn't be. It would be, or it'd be more misplaced. We are the right place for that particular type. But if you just say, I want to talk about why the Democrats lost, or I want to talk about a topic, that's not really a position. You have to have something that's disagreeable in some way. It doesn't have to be aggressive. I hope my section prioritizes a depolarizing approach to opinion journalism, but I think reasonable particularity is the first part for sure. In terms of supporting contributors with whom I disagree, there's a few different strategies for mobilizing like that form of impartiality. As a news reporter, that already is something we have to practice all the time. When we conduct an interview, we don't indicate whether we agree or disagree broadly with an interviewee, unless it's on a really important position of human rights. Obviously, then we can signal that we support that. But otherwise, if it's about tuition increases, for example, we gotta put on a bit of a poker face and disregard our personal interests in tuition and fairly report the university side of those conversations as well in the event we're talking about tuition increases. So similarly, you bring that disposition to as an editor. The other way that's a little bit more unique about the way I try and practice this is there's a book I read, which I just finished reading, and you'll know what I'm talking about because I talked to you about it 2 days ago, is Rita Felsky's The Limits of Critique. And I didn't know this, it was related to Bruno Latour's thought at the time, but it all comes back to Bruno. It really does.
And the French language.
And the French language, ultimately, which I do not speak. Yes. Yeah, really. Hardest language I've ever tried to learn. But Rita Felsky I'm not a literary scholar, so I probably couldn't appreciate the book as much as someone who is. But it's about post-critical reading. And the genesis of the book is that rather than putting yourself or trying to seek out what's behind the text and constantly reading in a suspicious way about what this text is reproducing about society, put yourself in front of the text and try and imagine different interpretive possibilities. The term I kind of used, I don't think it's from the book, is just imagine different interpretive worlds and kind of create a bit of a decision tree with what you're reading.
After a brief pause because our camera's overheated, and then another brief pause because Spencer was messing up the mic, we're back, and we're going to talk more about the opinion section.
Okay.
So the start of your time as opinion editor, I believe, was the first time, at least in the recent past, that opinion has been its own section, separate from what used to be blog and is now humor. So what has that been like? How have you approached it differently than people might have in the past and tried to shape it into its own thing, independent from an entirely different thing that for some reason was grouped together with it?
Yeah, I'm very grateful for the division, obviously. I am not a funny person or capable of writing like in a humorous way.
You have your moments.
Yeah, I can't be funny on command, though, as I justify my abstinence from humor writing. So the reason we started the Columnist program was frankly in part because op-ed interests are the way the section was running before, and I continued it for a little bit, was exclusively dependent on submissions from members of the community, and for reasons that I ultimately chronicled in like the Reloaded report, I wasn't getting enough of those to really justify the existence of what I was doing. It doesn't mean I wasn't doing anything. I was spending a lot of time working with a few contributors, and I did my very best to make sure that they had the best piece. So I instead of publishing maybe 10 pieces a month, I'd publish 5 ones that I was happy with. And I put a lot of effort into those contributors that I work with. There came a point though where I did want to publish more, and I had opinion journalism has just always been poorly defined, and how it's practiced, and who is a columnist, what an op-ed is, what it even means. It means something different than how we actually refer to it. Now it originally meant opposite the editorial page in 1970. Now it's kind of left its meaning and moved away from referring to having any relationship with editorials as written by editorial boards. Even the editorial board as a concept is a bit awkward, because at community newspapers it seems to refer to the actual group of editors that run the publication. At really large publications, it's not actually the group of editors, but it's a very small group of professional editorial writers that do so in the publication's name, but as a group called the editorial board. So there's terminological problems that are endemic to journalism that I think uniquely made it difficult to chart the future of my section, even as someone who did come with a relatively considerable background in journalism before I had started being editor. So a lot of it is working through concepts like that. Like, what does it actually mean to have a guest essay, which is what the New York Times calls their op-eds now. I haven't really embraced the term in part because I don't want to just copy the New York Times, although I'm very much inclined. It's just a beautiful publication in a lot of ways. It messes up in major ways a lot of times, but the vast majority of the time it is an excellent publication. So trying to chart opinion's future has meant a lot of navigating through what it means to do opinion journalism, which is kind of a boring answer, and also dealing with the fact that my section is exclusively dependent on other people to approach me first. Now we've moved away from that with columnists, but I think what it taught me before I was deputy managing editor was to pay a lot of attention to how our publication is perceived, because my section's success was a function of that. And if we were not known to a lot of people, if people did not know what an op-ed was, how to write one, if they felt Instagram was a better medium or Reddit was a better medium to convey their thoughts, which there are considerable pros and cons to both. I think that there is absolutely a place for what we do, independent of those mediums. I do not think they're remotely an environment that is a consistent guarantee of quality by any means. I don't think that's a really contentious proposition either. So a lot of opinion is figuring out what our place is in relation to other environments in which people can post opinionated user-generated content, and then raising the profile of folks like columnists.
I mean, other than Kathleen Kingsbury and The Times, obviously, are there any other publications or specific people that you feel do opinion journalism well, or that you turn to for inspiration in how you're running your own section here?
Yeah, that's really hard, and I've tried to find instances of this, not because I'm looking for wisdom elsewhere necessarily to copy and paste in, but I am looking for something. In part, I've figured it out by now, but there's lots of individual columns that I like. I read Andrew Coyne in the Globe and Mail a lot. There's as a kid, I really like Cillian Crawford in the Tyee. Michelle Seesaw in the Walrus now, David Moskrop in the Walrus now. There's lots of I can give you endless names of columnists in Canada that I think are excellent, and then I've pointed my own columnists to not copy paste and exclusively take their sentence constructions and bring them in here, but to gesture towards the story being told through each column as a larger story than the individual filing that gets published and posted online. So. Short answer on the editorial, the side of being an editor, not really. There's not a lot of, honestly, that Kathleen Kingsbury piece is the most insightful thing you can find, and even then, because the profile of opinion journalism is really low, the profile of columnists is super high in journalism. Everyone knows like Ezra Klein, for example. Like that's everyone knows who Ezra Klein is. That's not a problem. But like in terms of how to facilitate good opinion journalism and deal with in Canada there's a it continues to be a problem of opinion journalism looking very white and very very male. And there was a good story in JSource about this, and it stuck with me is how do we find and navigate the challenge of not everyone can be a columnist, right? Like the number one thing that a columnist needs is a passion for a subject and the consistent ability to have something worth saying. If you are just saying shit, akin to Joe Rogan, just kind of talking for the sake of talking without any fidelity to truth or accuracy, that's obviously not what we want to be doing. That's does not make us different from Meta. That does not raise the bar for what we do. So finding columnists is tricky, and then also making sure that we're correcting for inequities that we see in the world around us is really difficult. And I haven't found a lot of publications that have articulated their approaches to doing that. So I would say progress has been slow and meaningful, and given me a lot to think about. I think opinion's in a pretty good place now. I'm happy with the obviously the columnists that I have now that are working at the publication. I'm excited for the next round of columnists that we're going to be bringing in too, and expanding our team. I would like to see opinion grow in the future. Again, I do think that there is a real place for opinion journalism. There's been some talk about in the last decade or so if opinion journalism has gone too far, if it's an abrasive and kind of ugly form of doing journalism. I don't think so. I don't think it has to be. I think some people have kind of ruined it for us a little bit with some outlandish op-eds, and the New York Times is part of that. Kathleen Kingsbury has been referred to as the accidental opinion editor of the New York Times because she took the job after a previous editor ran an op-ed by Tom Cotton, a United States senator, who wrote this ridiculous op-ed about the Black Lives Matter movement, and I think it was titled "Send in the Troops" or something like that. It's from 2020 to quell civil rights protests. It was really really gross. But those events leave a stain on I think all opinion journalism generally. Really aggressive columnists that use an anti-democratic rhetoric to label or a dog whistle and call out marginalized members of society. That does something to all opinion journalists. So I think the environments in which my section operates is complicated in ways that are different from the rest of the publication. I don't think it's a harder job necessarily than anyone else, but I just think the challenge is a little bit more isolating. Which makes for a fun challenge each and every day.
That's beautiful. Do you have a specific piece that was particularly fun, or not fun, but one of your favorite ones to edit? I guess you could talk about one you've written too, but I think I'm curious about what it's like to work with contributors who aren't necessarily like your regular staff. You probably have some interesting experiences of working with people who don't typically work in journalism.
Yeah, I do. Those are always fun. I always really appreciate op-ed contributors who are taking a real risk and putting their putting themselves out in what I think is at times more hostile environments than regular journalism. I shouldn't say that, but I do think, and perhaps because we're in a like the environments of being in a university and the preponderance of like Reddit on campus, I think makes for sometimes uniquely hostile environment for people who are wanting to contribute to opinion. I think everyone at the Ubyssey has had some pretty awful things said about them at some points that are just kind of outlandish and unacceptable. And just frankly immature. So I think if I'm being honest, our readership does at times have a maturity problem with reacting to things. So I'm very grateful for the opinion journalists that have, and my columnists and the op-ed contributors that have bravely put their names on something and kind of dismissed some of the bullying that they've encountered. But that said, one of my favorite op-eds to work on to this day from a contributor who's never been staff was a contributor named Anna Ponton, who wrote an essay called Why the Protesters Won't Talk. And it was my favorite for, among one reason, it was timely. It doesn't have, it isn't, it, when it's really hard to interpret the world when you're inside of it, when you're talking, when the world is changing around you, it's really hard to make sense of it when you're literally within the world changing. It's easy to do that, or easier to do that retrospectively, looking back on history, for example. But when you're in, when you're in things that are changing, it's really hard to do that. I think Anna did that really well. She articulated a really coherent arguments about why protesters who demonstrating for divestments from companies complicit in genocide in Palestine in 2024 would not meet with the university when they were given the opportunity to. I thought it was interesting in part because I had been covering those negotiations between protesters, not all of them, but when Kerner Library was occupied in May 2024, I was up there with some of the demonstrators for about 3 or 4 hours. And I had that op-ed responded to questions that I had as a reporter. They weren't questions I was taking a position on publicly, but they, like all of us talk about what we're thinking about the news, and that one really it gave me a lot of hope that there are people out there who are willing to do exactly what the section is for. So for a lot of reasons, I'm still grateful to Anna to this day for signing their name to that piece. And for writing it, and teaching me a lot about the news I was covering. More recently, I've had quite a bit of fun working with Quyen Schroeder on Point of Inquiry, covering the AMS. I say that because I had not the reporting half of what I do, and I'm as deputy managing editor, obviously I do reporting, but I had continued to contribute to news for particularly since my second year at editorial. I've been reporting quite extensively on demonstrations and policing on campus, and on social movements on campus and university affairs. And it was very nice to be able to bring reporting and opinion writing together. So obviously I love Maya's column too. It's fantastic, but this is the even rarer form. Like what Quyen does is a reported column, and that is a particularly kind of fraught and complex environment to work in when you're interacting and presenting new information, interacting with sources and presenting new information as a result of interviewing people, reading documents, and presenting things that are new to our report, but you're not promising impartiality. Which is a pretty big distinction from what we've been promising readers in the past and even in the recent history. And there's not a lot of examples to point to in order to figure this out. I'm still learning about how to organize this, and so is Quyen, but I think she's doing a fantastic job with it. I think it's a real service to our university community. I think it's a real service to voters in the AMS elections, and it will be, giving them a lot of things to reflect on when times come to elect the new AMS executive and student representatives of Senate and the Board of Governors. So I'm enjoying that quite a bit. I think it's a really I'd really wanted people to focus on local university affairs for quite some time, and I'm so happy that Quyen joined the section earlier this year.
Great, yeah. I said I would come back to this, so I figure this is as good a time as any before we start to wrap things up. But cast yourselves back to 2020, 2021, when we met in high school. How did that happen?
Right.
What were you doing that allowed for this to happen?
Gave rise to this. As I remember it, we were both student journalists in high school, and you'd reached out to me from the New Westminster Student Press, as it was called, right?
I think so.
You think so? Okay, well, I remember what my newspaper is called. It's called The Griffin's Nest. I was the editor-in-chief from 2020 to 2022. I was very blessed to work with a fantastic team, 5 editors that really transformed the entire publication. There are so many things I took away from that. I think really my journey in public service I would credit to starting there when I was 16 years old. I took that really seriously. I remember people making fun of me for taking it so seriously, and I hope I've demonstrated it was worth it. That publication continues to this day, and I'm very proud of the people who still work there, and I'm still in contact with them. But What I was doing when you contacted me was I was defending my publication as from threats to press freedom, which was there's about 6 or 7 incidents. It started out with an editorial we wanted to write in 2020 that was critical of critical of students in our community who are spreading conspiracy theories in group chats, and I think as I recall, our administration was uncomfortable with that, and gradually when we became critical of the school district itself, the school board at one point had asked our principal, as I understand what happened, to intervene in our publication and prevent the editorial from being run. At that point, another editor and I, who's now an editor at the Western Gazette, Jessica Kim, hopped on a train and we went to the BC Civil Liberties Association office, which was closed because it was the middle of the pandemic. But we eventually got in contact with them. They wrote a fantastic letter along with a journalist and professor at Toronto Metropolitan University in our supports to the Vancouver School Board and our principal, instructing them to allow us to run the op-ed. That eventually happened. And the letter was the best. Received it on May 16th. It was the best birthday gift I could have gotten. In my second year as an editor there, the Vancouver School Board didn't seem to learn from that letter. And at one point, we had started filing freedom of information requests. I think we filed 1 or 2. I can't remember exactly what we were looking for at the time, but a senior school official right below the level of a deputy or associate superintendent had come down to talk to us and try and discourage us from filing freedom of information requests. We were told that was taking time away from student learning, as if there was a correlation between the number of FOI requests the school district received and literacy, which was outlandish and is especially outlandish considering what I study now. But I remember that conversation probably the best out of any of the conversations having to defend our right to do journalism independent of completely unnecessary and unwarranted interference, because the school official come down, talk to us, and we had our principal, vice principal, the teacher sponsor, and then someone else, and then this individual from the district, and she had kept saying to us, well, we have concerns. We're responsible. And I would say, I started out politely and very curiously, like, for what? Like, what are you concerned about? And she just couldn't give us an answer. Like, there was like this, she could not actually articulate what it is that the school district felt they needed to be concerned about as responsible for our publication. And eventually, she had invoked the School Act, and then retrospectively, I kind of snapped and said, which part? And there was a silence in the room, and I remember saying, I think you're referring to School Regulation 265/89, subsection 7G, about the duty of a principal to regulate student activity on and off campus. It was very, I admit it was very much inspired, I think, my performance that day by the deposition scene from The Social Network. Maybe interpreted that movie the wrong way when I was younger, but it stuck out to me because I just kept asking for an answer as to why we were having this discussion. Like, what are you responsible for? Defamation? Okay, let's say something libelous. Doesn't seem congruent to me, from what I understood about libel at the time, to involve yourself in the production of that content and then disclaim, like, that you actually had no responsibility in the event we actually publish something defamatory. That's not consistent with how we actually think about, like, the law of libel, as we've talked about. If you could have done something and should have done something to stop libelous content, you are responsible. So the school district's theory, to the extent that was their theory, was ridiculous. And it was really frustrating because she had sent a letter afterwards and saying, we expect you to have all communications reviewed by your teacher sponsor beforehand. And we sent that letter to the TIE and they did a story on it, thankfully, raising the profile of what we were facing. And other media reported on our issue too. And I wasn't looking for attention, truly. Like, I talk about it now and because it was like in a bit of a humorous way, because it was a bit funny, a bit frustrating. I was really mad at the time. But it was a very formative experience, and I appreciate in a weird way the challenge that was my school district. I respect a lot of the school officials there, especially as someone who wants to be a civil servant too. They're civil servants, like, as well. They're very different type of work than I want to do. But, like, it inspired a lot of my journey in public service in ways that I don't think I realized at the time. I don't think they certainly realized. I think they probably were very grateful when I graduated. I actually I'm fairly certain of that based on what I know from other people telling me about my teachers at the time telling me about it afterwards. But that is what I was up to. I had and along the way, my co-editor and I that publication had drafted a law that we had been to protect student journalism at the secondary level, not post-secondary. It would have been, if it was passed, it's to be the first statute in the Commonwealth, I believe, to explicitly protect student journalism in high schools. It's inspired by some statutes that have been passed in the United States since the 1980s by the Student Press Law Center. We worked with a lot of lawyers to put it together. It was endorsed by almost every major civil liberties organization in the country, but a dozen. The Canadian Civil Liberties Association, the BC Civil Liberties Association, my current employer, the Freedom of Information and Privacy Association, many others. But I think that's where we intersected, as you were also facing some press freedom issues, and I think you maybe encountered the Tyee pieces or something like that, or maybe it was the Instagram accounts. It was the Instagram accounts. And then, yes, because I was looking for other student journalists in the area and in BC. Yeah, that's what I was up to at the time.
And now we're here. I think you had followed me or something, and I was like, who the hell is this guy?
Yeah, that sounds about right. I was going through everybody who followed the student newspapers, like accounts at different schools. That's how I found everybody.
And that's beautiful. So to actually wrap things up now, I have a Vilest Rag classic for you.
Okay.
You've probably encountered this question at some point.
Oh yeah.
But
oh god.
If you had to switch lives with another editor for a day, who would it be?
Saumya.
Whoa.
In part because Saumya and I have to, Saumya behind the camera. Oh my god, Saumya Kamra behind the camera. Sorry.
Joke that's never been made ever before.
Never. Saumya and I get, maybe unfortunately for her, share the managing office that she invited me to share with her a while ago.
And she regrets it.
And I'm sure she regrets it every day because she did not know how much time I'd be spending in there. But we have to run a lot of different things together. And one of the responsibilities that we jointly hold is the administration of applications for the Contributing Journalist Program, or our entry-level program, and all other and staffing across the publication. So I deliver the orientation and deliver the trainings, and Saumya and I work on the interpretation of the assessment of applications, and Saumya delivers them to everybody magically, sending out at times several dozen emails informing people of their acceptance or rejection, and it's work that is kind of overlooked at our publication, but like that is how the entire thing goes, is by someone locking in like she does every month and to do the grunt work that keeps the publication going. So I think I would like to spend a day in her shoes to know a little bit more about what it is like to do that work, which is not as visible as it should be, but I think it would give me a better sense of appreciating it, given I get to do what I perceive as the funner stuff. But yeah. Yay.
We love Saumya.
Yes. Who's hating this?
She's making a disgusted face right now. She's really mad at us because we're supposed to go see Nuremberg and we're running late.
Yes. Oops. Sorry, I yap.
Anyways, okay, it's movie time.
It is movie time.
That was Spencer Izen, the Ubyssey's opinion editor and deputy managing editor. So you can join me next week to learn about another member of our editorial board. And coming up in a few seconds, a moment in Ubyssey's history with columnist Quyen Schroeder.
Cast yourselves back to 1983. India wins the Cricket World Cup by 43 runs. LeVar Burton's Reading Rainbow first premieres, and the first commercial cellular telephone call is made. For this story, I'm going to have to set up some broader political context, so get excited. In BC, just a couple years prior to 1983, the Social Credit Party is elected in BC, forming a provincial government. This party, known as, or abbreviated to the SOCRED, angled for a lot of austerity programs, including cutting rent control, funding towards human rights initiatives, and attacking labor bargaining rights. Lots of labor organizations, publicly and privately, united under what they called Operation Solidarity. This Solidarity Coalition staged numerous events, protests, and pickets around BC, and these demonstrations were so large that it seemed like they may shut down the university, mostly due to people not wanting to cross the picket line. At this time, the AMS, our lovely student union, was up to shenanigans. On November 2nd, council directed the general manager to maintain services in the student union building, even should there be a strike, which would effectively mean replacing striking workers. So, hiring scabs. The general manager made a statement denying that additional labor would have been hired to keep the student union building, open. And he acknowledged that the mandate was given to allow more workers to be hired if necessary, but said that it was unlikely to happen. All of this was decided and discussed during an in-camera session, which means that members of the public weren't able to know what AMS Council was deliberating on. Additionally, in a letter to the Ubyssey, someone listed various members of the AMS Council at the time as scabs of the year. These decisions, however, were just in contingency for a much larger strike on campus. However, these scabbing shenanigans actually pushed another strike into action, that of the Office and Technical Employees Union, or OTEU, who at the time had 11 members in the AMS. The OTEU had already been in negotiations with the AMS and actually had strike approval for more than a month. And the OTEU was seeking a 15% wage increase because of staff reductions and, in doing so, increased workloads. The AMS had offered them 7% for their wage increase, which they then kindly dropped to 5%. That reduction, in combination with councils approving the hiring of scabs, pushed the OTEU into action, and in doing so, they started their strike. Other unions on campus were in support of the strike initially, including the Canadian Union of Public Employees, or CUPE, and the Association of University and College Employees, AUCE. Though some organizations on campus did support the picket line, including the most kissable organization on campus, the Ubyssey, who decided to move their operations to the Lutheran Campus Center instead of publishing from behind the picket line. Other organizations and people were less supportive. Students crossed the picket lines in droves. The AMS president supervised trucks who crossed the picket line to deliver goods, and then locked the door in Ubyssey reporters' faces and hung up on their calls when they tried to ask them about that. And the British band, Gang of Four, crossed the picket line to perform in a concert as well, which is kind of funny because they were, in fact, known for their Marxist leanings. The Gang of Four justified this by saying that they'd go bankrupt if they didn't play the concert, which some people have been credulous about because they were on a national tour at the time. Additionally, the Alma Mater Society's programs coordinator said to a female pictor, and I quote, "Why don't you go and find a baseball team and a baseball bat and stick it up your cunt?" However, not everyone who crossed the picket line was in bad faith. Very cutely, students and faculty members who were tending to plants or animals were given a pass to go through the picket, which I think is incredibly sweet. But the OTEU strike lasted for 12 days, and by the time those 12 days were up, QP 116 crossed the picket line, which is sad because the OTEU respected their picket line when they struck on 2 occasions. As well, during the strike, basically every AMS business remained operational. The only difference was that in some places, like the pit, they ran out of various products. Some places took the opportunity to increase prices during the strike. Additionally, CITR kept broadcasting from behind the strike lines as well, with only 2 of their members honoring the picket line. By the end of the strike, the OTEU secured a 2-year contract that would guarantee a 3-staged increase over those 2 years. First of 5%, then 3%, then 5%. And that was the OTEU strikes. This has been since 1918, not crossing picket lines since 1918.
In today's episode of the Vilest Rag, you heard from Spencer Izen, the Ubyssey's Deputy Managing and Opinion Editor, Columnist Quyen Schroeder, and myself, Elena Massing, the Ubyssey's Features Editor. This episode was filmed and edited by Saumya Kamra. The music is by Alicia Chaudhry, and the graphics were designed by Ayla Cilliers. So thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week.